House of the Dragon episode one. It's gonna be an interesting discussion because me, as a person who didn't watch a single episode of Game of Thrones, and Mac, a big one of the biggest fans of Game of Thrones, and this is an important discussion because when you watch something, you should try as much as possible not to relate it to other things you watch because it's gonna affect your judgment. You're gonna try to be like, oh, this was related to this that I saw in this angle in this episode, and it's gonna kind of affect your judgment, and you can kind of sets up an expectation that you don't want. So
Yeah.
let's get started. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
So right now we are coming fresh in the books chronologically. According to the books, we are heading into the Targaryen Civil War, which is a horrifying aspect because the Targaryens, as you know, are the only family of Valerians to make it from the continent of Valeria over to Westeros. And they brought them their dragons, which are this incredible power, military power, of course, which is that no one in the world has an answer for. I'm just excited to see what the show does that the books not necessarily do. I'm excited to see the differences between the book and the shows. I also know that this is covering a lot of territory that isn't necessarily discussed in the books, so it's really exciting. But chronologically, and they told us in the beginning of the show, it's like this is 172 years before Daenerys Targaryen, which is where Game of Thrones is what it's all about, in the Song of Fire and Ice. It was pretty cool.
What do you think of the first episode?
Yeah, first episode was pretty cool. They did a very good job of explaining. They did a good job of explaining all the lore that there is, and just setting up for the show itself. I actually feel like they explained too much of Game of Thrones, of Song of Fire and Ice. They put too much effort into that, and they should really make sure they really focus very, very heavily on just this series. This world is full of characters. A Song of Fire and Ice, or excuse me, Game of Thrones, the actual book. I have one of the hard copies of the actual book. In the back is an index of characters. An encyclopedia of these characters, because there are so many families and so many branching relationships, and it's very easy to get confused. And I'm nervous that they're going to keep dipping into Game of Thrones characters for like the reference points and keeping the fans engaged or whatever. But what they're going to end up doing is causing an oversaturation of characters and confuse the audience if they do that too much. The dragons were excellent. The CGI was great. Fight scenes were cool, and I'm actually into the Targaryens. I was surprised when the trailer came out. I said to myself, "Uh-oh, this trailer looks like it might actually be kind of good." And now I'm eating my words. And the trailer was good, and episode one was definitely good.
For me, like I found that episode one it started a little blurry for me.
Yeah,
and put aside the fact that I didn't watch the original series, I don't think it really mattered because I felt that there was this problem that you were kind of afraid of, which is you just see a bunch of people talking on a table, and I didn't know like who the main character was, and kind of confused. And not only was it because there's a lot of characters, it's just that they were talking about in a very fancy accent, which put such many fancy words that I wasn't able to understand, and lots of names, and it was a lot of jargon involved. I was like, what are y'all talking about? Like,
sorry, everyone. We just got a little bug. So I was saying that I felt there was an overpopulation of characters, and that it was hard to follow up with everything that was happening right at the beginning. You had a lot of characters. They were talking really fast, talking really fancy, lots of jargon, lots of, and it was really fast. Like I couldn't even follow up with what was happening. And obviously it got better later after the introduction of Matt Smith. And I would like to apologize from now because Matt Smith's character is Daemon, so I might accidentally call him Matt Damon. But it's fine about that. I don't know. I got this real vibe that he's gonna sleep with his niece, because that's common in the Bible for people to sleep with their uncles.
Oh.
And there was a lot of biblical references with like chopping people's penises and killing the killers and all of that. So I was like, please don't give me that. But I feel like they're gonna do it. I don't know. But what do you think?
So George R.R. Martin is a phenomenal author. One of my favorite writers, and personally I believe one of the greatest fictional writers in the history of writing, in the history of literature. And you are absolutely correct. Everything you just said is absolutely correct. The Targaryens, these royal families, especially in the Game of Thrones verse, this Fire and Ice, this world they live in, incest in royal families is very, very common. If you notice, all the Targaryens are blonde,
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. It's because they keep breeding inside the family line to keep the bloodline pure. Weird, but like they're gonna do it. And yes, there will be blood. A whole lot of death and destruction and blood and torture. This world is visceral. This world is very realistic in the consequences that befall people. A dragon, for instance, is not a pet. It is a dragon, and you can imagine what it does to a city when it gets inside there. A sword going through somebody is a sword. It's going to go through you, and it's just it's nice to watch these worlds and watch these characters get into fights, and like a sword hit somebody and not just brush it off. No, you're losing your arm, or you lose an eye, or you lose a hand. It's funny that you said you didn't know who the main character was. I actually had the exact same feeling when I watched Game of Thrones the first time. The first 2 episodes lead you to believe that one of these characters, Ned Stark, is the main character. I was so convinced. I was like, oh, for sure. But it's Sean Penn. So all of my movie instincts are telling me this is a dead person. This character is for sure a dead person. Sean Penn in all of his movies gets killed. All of them. He gets every
You are
time.
hired to be dead.
Guaranteed going to be killed. And so I'm watching Game of Thrones. I'm like, I love Sean Penn, and he's the lead character in this show. This is going to be incredible. Killed, executed, head cut off in front of your children, stuck on a stick in front of your children, in front of the whole kingdom. Episode 3, I'm like, this is crazy. What can they do? And then we had 9 seasons of doing that, where they just kept knocking off main characters. I think this is going to be one of those shows. I want you to pick like 2 or 3 favorite characters, see if they survive the entire show. That's what you should be trying to do. We should be putting bets on who the real survivors are going to be, aside from the actual protagonist.
So how come Game of Thrones was able to write a series where there was no main characters?
So there are, because George R.R. Martin, the original author of these novels, wrote entire family lines as main characters. You could say that the 3 main characters of Game of Thrones are like Arya Stark,
Jon Snow,
and Daenerys Targaryen. But like it's so hard to just say that, because then you have like Littlefinger, or you have the Hightower. Yeah, that's the same person. You have the family who had Joffrey, the whatever their royal name was. There's so many names. It's just so hard for me to have to remember all these. I need a chart. So I can be like, this person was married to this person. They had these 2 kids, but they were incest, and then they had a dog, and that dog, and like that's how they connect. And you just have to keep track of all this stuff. There are just so many characters. I'm interested to see who they keep bringing in, because they're going to introduce even more characters. If you think this is a lot, just you wait. You're going to meet 30 more characters.
How is that even possible? Because I remember, for example, Scandal, a few years back, they fell into this problem where suddenly you just have an overwhelm of characters, and some of the characters just disappeared out of nowhere. Like no one heard about them anymore. Like what happened to Susan Ross? What happened to whoever it was, Sally Langston?
Difference.
How can you get away with so much characters? I haven't watched Game of Thrones. That's why I'm asking these questions. But
very simply, you don't get away with having all those characters. You just kill these characters off to make room for more characters. And it's the perfect strategy. It's perfect. Here are these 3 characters. Think of The Walking Dead. We had Shane and Lori and Carl and Rick Grimes. And then you have, well, Shane's actually dead. Oh, well, Lori's also dead. Oh, well, Carl's also dead. Oh, wait, Rick's dead. And then you just keep killing off characters, and you just make room for more characters. It is a legit strategy. It is a legitimate strategy.
I see. That's really interesting. What I noticed, like this show specifically, I looked at which is supposed to be the current, the king, so the brother of the main character. I felt that his style was a little too boring for me at the beginning. But again, that's what they wanted us to see, that he was broken, that he was weak. He was a weak king.
Exactly
He was a king that's not able to handle things on their own. And then you have his brother who's aggressive, who kills people, who chops people's penises, who ambushes them and punishes them on his own way. My favorite scene of the episode was, I think that's the consensus on that. It was when he and his brother were arguing in the palace after like the whole taking the shot on the name of his infant who died and all of that. That was definitely my favorite scene. And
yes,
but You know, the episode that was when I look at the overall arc of the episode, it didn't give me the vibe that people were giving from Game of Thrones. Because when Game of Thrones was on, people were crazy. People were
Yeah,
waiting for the next episode. People were like, "Oh my god, Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones."
for sure.
Why was that not the case in this episode? At least in my
Hmm.
opinion, it didn't give me that vibe.
I think you're. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you can go on Twitter after the day after, and it was trending #1 worldwide. But like, Game of Thrones would trend worldwide for like 3 days in a row after an episode. It was crazy. I think that because this is a prequel. I mean, oh no, it's literally a prequel. It's not. It's not a figurative. It's literally a prequel. I think it's a spinoff. I think a lot of people see it as a spinoff. They see it as a not necessarily a continuation of the story, but an addition to the story that already exists. Again, this timeline has already been established. This world already exists. The books can be read. They've been out for decades. Actually, they're still being made. I can't even say that. So, George R. R. Martin, if you're watching this, please release the next book. Please, please. I cannot wait any more years. I need this. I need to finish. I need my closure, George. Please. But with that being said, there's just so much content and lore already established. I think they can continue to introduce these characters and continue to make these stories really good. Like I really think this is going to be a cool show. I really think the show is going to be very interesting. I think they're going to do a lot of fun things. I don't think it will ever be as popular as Game of Thrones. I think it's considered a spinoff by a lot of their fans. I've seen a lot of the fans talk about the show. They say it's a cool show. They're just really not that excited for it. They're just looking for their fan favorite character to do some really cool stuff. I think Game of Thrones caught a lot of people off guard because it was a lot of people's first time getting into this fantasy, sprawling, epic genre of show. And it allowed them to really experience a lot of stuff for the first time, like character death or a romance between two characters you never expected, or the romance that you were waiting for the entire show and it finally happens. Like there are all these things that a lot of people didn't get to experience that Game of Thrones gave them because it gave them every version of everything. Any anime you've ever watched, any trope you've ever watched, everything. It's all in this show because it's huge. The episodes are hour long. There's 9 seasons. It's a massive show. I don't think people are going to get that fresh novel experience anymore because they've already seen it all for 9 seasons. I don't think this show can do anything new that we already haven't seen. We've already seen dragons. We know what they can do. We love them. They're crazy. They're cool, but like we know what a dragon can do. We already have massive battles and wars. We've seen it. We already knows what happens in the future. We actually know what happens to these characters in this story now, but it doesn't matter because we're here to see it happen. So that's the only luxury they can really take as the writers for the show is like either you continue with the same path you already have of these books that's been established, or you can like do your own thing, just like the show did itself. The writers of the show did that. They didn't follow the books to a T. The Game of Thrones books, mind you, are very different than the TV shows. They do not follow the same structure chronologically. There are massive differences. There are characters who are not in the books at all that are in the show. There are characters who died in the books way early on who are in the show way later in the show. It's a different show. So I'm just excited to see what they get away with, what they want to do, or what paths they want to take. Because ultimately they only have to follow the chronology of the show. They don't have to worry about the books to a T. They just don't have to. And it's really, I think that's freeing for them.
I definitely agree, and just like how we say in the comics, just because it's in the comics doesn't mean it's better.
Exactly.
Just because it's in the books doesn't mean it's better. So
that's exactly right.
No, just you don't have to limit yourself with what the books give you. All you have to do is just go with the best option that you can possibly go with, as long as the story makes sense. So what did you think of all of the graphic use in this episode specifically? Because I feel like they reached the point where in the art where like I feel that too much sexual and too much like blood doesn't really add to the story. Because I mean, historically from whatever the 40s until like the 2010s, these scenes were just because they wanted to get like more viewership. They want to get more money because they know people are gonna be more interested to watch movies that have sex scenes in them. So what do you think of their use right now in 2022, and how effective are they?
I mean, you're absolutely right. Sex and violence have always sold. Sex literally sells. Violence sells. And again, what I talked about earlier, a lot of people had never experienced that in a TV show. the most violence they ever got out of a TV show was something like a shooting or like a fist fight or something. They've never seen someone get drawn and quartered. They've never seen someone get hacked to death with a bunch of axes. But like watching Game of Thrones gave people that experience. People didn't sit through 5-minute sex scenes, Jon Snow, but like we did in Game of Thrones. And so for a lot of people, it was that first experience. It was novel. It was something fresh. They've seen that before. And so the first episode itself only had one sex scene. It was an orgy, mind you, but it really wasn't as vulgar as it usually was in the previous Game of Thrones show, like those seasons. The sex scenes in Game of Thrones used to be like softcore pornography. Legitimately, it was like the positions, and you would see all the motion. You're like, okay, they're actually having sex, cool. But in this one, it's just like, oh yeah, they're having sex, and it's more like a narrative point. Matt Smith, I actually think it was a very tasteful sex scene what they did, because it really didn't show much at all. The actor he was performing with only showed a little bit of full frontal, and not even full frontal, just you know what I'm saying, waist up. So it's very sparingly done. I do not think that this will be the standard of the entire show. I do think there will be some incredible nudity along the way, but much like there will be wild violence to come for sure. For sure.
I see. What do you think of? Sorry, what do I want to ask? What do you think of the guy whoring his girl to the king?
Oh, again, this has only started. I think what they've done so far is they've teased us with a few things they're going to do. I really, really think it is going to get much, much, much more vulgar very quickly. I think he did that to placate his king. I mean, he is a man of honor who is loyal to his country and his king. He is very willing to make that sacrifice. And he expects that sacrifice of his daughter as well. It's actually kind of reflected in the way the king's wife talks to her daughter. She's like, the men go on battlefields. That's their responsibility. They have to fight for their kingdom. This is our battlefield. We do this right here. They can't do this. Only we can. And it's like, oh, okay. So like, that's kind of how Hightower, that's the guy who sent his daughter. He's the hand of the king. He sent it. He was like, yeah, go put on your dead mother's dress and go keep the king comfortable. And it's like, ugh, one, disgusting, but also like, oh, he's down. That guy, if he's willing to do that, ask yourself this: if he's willing to do that, what else is he willing to do for his king?
Exactly.
That's
so
how hard
why didn't they show it to us happening? Did it actually happen, or they just?
I don't think it did. I don't think it did happen. I think if it did happen, they would have definitely showed us, or they would have definitely implied very heavily, like showing them getting out of bed or something like that. They wouldn't have needed to sneak it around. I think it was more to shock the audience and to prove what level Hightower was on. Because his descendants in Game of Thrones is a wily trickster, secretive person. And so I'm curious to see if any of the connections of the Game of Thrones verse is the family ties, like the behaviors of those families, falls forward into or falls backwards in time with the House of Dragons. They also during the heir ceremony, when the king was naming his heir as his daughter, and all the lords from the land were coming to like bow to her. One king hesitated, and it was Baratheon. And it's so interesting because that's of course the Game of Thrones. He's one of the main kings of Westeros, King's Landing, King Baratheon. And so it's just interesting that, like, of course, his family would be the one to hesitate to kneel. There's just going to be little similarities like this. I'm hoping that they're interesting, but I also hope that they don't just give the audience everything they're looking for. I think they have, again, an interesting opportunity to not necessarily follow these books, but really take advantage of the world building that they already have established, and then switch up on the audience. The audience is going to have expectations. Don't let them switch it up on them. Take them for a surprise. They deserve it. If they're still watching this show, they deserve to be switched up on. You don't have to follow the same formula.
Exactly. I was worried like I was gonna get overhyped about House of Dragon, but then I thought it's gonna be a prequel. It's gonna be like probably like the
Yeah.
the Star Wars prequels or whatever. It's not gonna be like as good. And like no sequel or prequel has ever been like as good as the first movie when the movie is like really really good.
The
It's
Godfather 2. The Godfather
good.
2 was probably
Was
better than the first Godfather.
That's how you see it. I mean, but
Yeah,
that's an
maybe.
exception. Like as a general rule,
That is,
it's
yeah,
always
no,
not-
absolutely. That is an exception. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Very, very much the exception. Does not define the rule.
You wanted to talk about the families?
No, just because it's huge. The families are important because they again will.
Sorry, I lost track what we wrote in the chat because they don't appear here. So what we have left?
Oh, very well. Just quality of the show and characters.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. What do you want to say? I think I'm kind of like I probably like also want to talk about the. I have a question. So, how unhonorable are these knights? Because we've seen like people giving other people cheap shots from the back and all of that. So, how often does that happen in Game of Thrones?
Every day, every
day.
episode. Every episode, you're going to be like, dude, these people are ruthless. What's wrong with them? These people are sick. What are they doing? You're going to see that every episode. And you're going to be like, what are these people doing? They are loyal to their country and to their family and to their kings. These bloodlines are not a joke. These families are not a joke. They take this very, very serious. They will not marry certain families. They will not go to war with certain families. They will not support certain families. And it is going to be this, it's a political drama. I think the Targaryens are, I don't think the Targaryens are the quintessential family of the show. I don't know if there's a main character. It might be Varys Targaryen, the daughter of the king. But it could also not be. I think it's safer to say that there's like a main character family, and then there's like other families. So yeah, Targaryens, they're gonna do some crazy stuff. And it's crazy because the Targaryens control the dragons. So it's just like to have an enemy like Matt Smith, to have an enemy like Daemon Targaryen, the rebel prince, Daemon Targaryen, the butcher. Oh, dude. His legend speaks for himself. He has names in the Game of Thrones books from 200 years later, mind you. His name is well known. So I'm curious to see just what havoc he actually wreaks in the show. Make no mistake, they chose Matt Smith for a very specific reason. I think it's because he can look crazy, because Daemon is going to go crazy.
Is he gonna die?
Oh.
Is he getting killed?
Probably. Yes. I think if you ask that question about any character in Game of Thrones, then it's safe to say like yes.
It's more
Will they
probable
die?
that they
Probably.
die than
Probably.
they live.
Yeah, there's a very high chance that they meet their maker in this show. I don't think he's going to be in episode 1, 2, or 3 death, and I don't know if this is going to be like a multiple seasons show. But if he does die, it's definitely a later thing. There's no way they get rid of a murderer bad guy like that early on. He's clearly one of the big bads.
Awesome. So, What else? What else do you want to talk about? I guess we're almost out. We're all out of time, so we can just say anything.
Cool show. It's gonna be cool. I think Daemon Targaryen is gonna be crazy. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with these dragons. Again, we've already seen dragons have battles, but now you have 10 dragons, and maybe more, because I know they're gonna have some dragon births. So like, who knows what that means? We've never seen 2 dragons fight before, so that would be horrific. It's also really sad. These dragons are these mighty, powerful beings, and it's just like, here these humans are controlling them, sending them to war for them, like keeping them in caves and whatnot. And it's just, and every time they fight or one dies, you're just like, why? Like, why? Like, it's kind of like how when the horses get hurt, you're like, no, not the horses. Like, oh, people getting butchered. Who cares? Not the horse. No, the horses. Same thing for the dragons. I don't want the dragons to get hurt.
I don't have much expectations. I mean, I'll see what it goes. First episode was alright. It wasn't wow, but again, I feel that we're at a point in the industry where the first 2 episodes are just for word building, for introductions. They're not doing it like before, like putting everything in the pilot and see how it goes. So
exactly.
I'm not disappointed in the first episode. I'm not overly excited. I'm just like, okay, I like the scene with the 2 brothers arguing. That was a really strong scene.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we'll see how it goes. You know, you still have they still have a chance to wow us. I think they will. I mean, I hope
Yes.
so.
Yeah. They also have a chance to mess it all up. So let's hope they don't do that either. I do
All
not want to be
right.
reviewing this.
All right. Thank you everyone for being with us. Sorry for these problems, and we'll see you all next